Okay, so we're going to round out our homepage with these call out feature buttons down here on the bottom of the homepage. So let's get to it. And tab over and get into Dreamweaver here. And I'm going to locate the last section that we just completed, which is the goals section. And that would end with this main tag down here. And it should say main class, main light gray BG. And we're going to place our cursor at the end of that closing tag and hit the enter return key a couple of times. So we're going to go ahead and build out the content of this first, and then we're going to go in and style it. I already know what these classes with these div containers are going to look like, and I've already named them. So we're going to go ahead and just put those in, and then we'll style them following this. So we're going to do the same thing with the other two sections on this page. We're going to start with the main tag, so left caret main class, and this is going to be main again. And we're not adding anything else to this main class, or we're not adding an additional class to this like we did the previous two. So we're just going to end that with a right caret and then close that bracket out. Next, we are going to add a row. And in this, so like we've done previously, like this, so you're kind of getting the hang of this, right? So every time we kind of create one line or one section, it basically starts out as a row. And div class row. And but we're not quite done. I also want to make this row a series of 3 columns. So I'm going to go ahead and add an additional class to this row, and it's going to be grid 3. So we could nest this within the row, and that's actually a pretty common practice, but I think we can get away with doing our row and grid 3 together because we're not going to expand on this. It's just going to be one single row. So we're going to end that out with a right caret and then close that out. Okay, so we have row grid 3. So this stands for, basically what this stands for is we have a 3-column grid layout in this row. Next, we're going to build out each one of those containers, each one of those columns. And it's going to seem weird at first because the way that I want to build this out is I want to make each one of those sections one large button. And so to do that, we have to wrap each one of those content areas, each one of those columns in an A tag. So essentially I'm going to build one of these out, and then I'm going to copy and paste the other 2 together, and then we'll make some adjustments. It'll be a little bit easier to do it that way rather than doing like a lot of extra coding. So I'm going to type in the left caret A href, and for now I'm just going to go ahead and put the pound symbol in, and then later on I'll go in and replace that pound symbol with the correct link. And then I also need to add a class to this A tag to give it the properties that I want to give it in a minute. So this class is going to be called container. I'm going to spell it out this time. And then BTN. So I'm going to spell out container there, but abbreviate BTN. Don't ask me why. It's just the way I did it. Okay, and then right caret. Okay. Now this is what's going to essentially build our button. I'm not going to hit the enter return key just yet because I want to add the next piece to this, which is the div tag that's going to contain, or the div container that's going to contain this content. So the A tag is wrapping our container, believe it or not. So here we go. We're going to left caret here, and so this is going to be div class, and we're going to name this call span 1. Okay, so you kind of get the gist of it there, that this container is going to span 1 column. Okay, we could name it cell if we wanted to. That might also be another way to do it, but for this purpose we're going to call it call span 1 because it's going to create 1 column. Okay, so then hit the right caret to close that out. Now I'm going to hit the enter return key so that my A tag is wrapped around that div tag. So I'm keeping those two things together. I could, we could come in here and nest these in like this and really kind of showcase that way. So that way you'd really see that nesting there, something like that. That would be, we'd be tabbing those things in and you'd really see that structure of this container. But for me, I'm going to put these things together like this because to me those things, that's how it's working, that's how it's functioning. And I don't want to create extra lines that I don't necessarily need to. So that's why I'm keeping it that way. Okay. Next, we need to put in an H2 tag. So left caret H2. And so for now, I'm not going to put in the text for that because I want to just create the kind of the skeleton of these columns, and then I'm going to go ahead and put in some content in a minute. So I'm going to place my cursor after that H2 and then hit the enter return key. And then below the heading goes an image. And before we just drop an image in there, we actually want to put in that div class that we created for our image containers. This is why this class for image container is so versatile. We're going to use it for 3 images, and they're all going to be like displayed like right next to each other. If you remember what we did before, that image was just one image and it spanned that whole section. So we're basically using the exact same class, but they're 2 very different applications, and they're pretty much the same styling for it. That's why this class is so powerful and so versatile. So div class image container, and then we need to put in an image next after that. So inside of that div container is going to get an image. So left caret img src. I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank for now. So I'm going to hit my arrow key to the right, so it bypasses the quotation mark. Hit the space bar, type in alt, and then same thing, bypass that quotation mark with the arrow key, and then / and then right caret. So that'll actually be, we'll go in and fill that in later with our image and stuff. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and use the blank quotation marks because we'll end up copying and pasting this little this section a couple more times. And so then that way it'll save us some coding. Okay, so after the closing of that div tag, hit the enter return key. And after that, we want to add a paragraph tag. So type in a paragraph, and then this is going to be a very short description of, say, what this section might entail. I kind of went back and forth on this. Like in some ways, I don't know if we want a description underneath that image. I kind of like it because it separates the image a little bit and makes it a little bit design-wise, like makes it a little bit nicer. I don't think you have to really go to town in terms of a description. It just might be easier for your user as well to determine, like, okay, what am I clicking on here? What does this thing mean by current success stories? That'll be the heading that we put on there. And so you just might, put in there like, hey, check out my work. There's some really exciting stuff here, and it'd be really worth your time. Something to that effect. I mean, maybe not those exact words, but you got me. So we're just going to put that. I'm just going to use that filler text in there because, again, I'm going to copy and paste this section 2 more times, so I don't have to write all that code out, and then I can just plug in the correct thing. So here's how this works. We've got I'm just going to double check all my tags. So here's my A tag here. This is wrapping and containing this div container that we created called call span 1. And inside of that is an H2 tag. That's what starts it out. Then we have an image, which is housed inside of a div container called image container. And then we have our text underneath that, our paragraph tag. So what I'm going to do is from that closing A tag, I'm just going to highlight it up to the opening part of that A tag, and then hit Command C or Control C. And then after that cursor, place my cursor after the closing A tag, hit the enter return key, Command V or Control V, do it one more time. And so now I have my 3 containers ready to go. So then all I have to do is plug in the content for each one of those. So in the first one, where I have the H2 tag, I need to put in current success stories. And then in the second tag, it is internship experience. And then the third one is roadmap to next steps. And that's just what I came up with. You are totally welcome to change those titles to something more meaningful to you or more fun for you and your portfolio. Okay, so let's go back up to the top here. We need to add this image in here, and I would recommend you find images of your own that match your design and your style. Please do not use the ones that I provided. So go ahead and delete out the quotation marks, both of those, and then retype in a quotation mark, and then your code hint will come up. Hit the browse button, and then you can browse to your images folder. So this one, I believe, is, let's see here, current success right there. Go ahead and click open. In the alt tag, in between the paragraph, or in between the quotation marks there, this is going to be showcase. So this is linked to showcase page or something like that. Okay. And that'll pretty much do it for that first one. Like the Latin text or the lorem ipsum text there stays the same. You would want to change that for each one of those, but for me, that's going to stay the same for right now. Oh, I take that back. There is one more thing that I need to do. We need to actually link this box to the appropriate page. So where we have our A tag and where we left that pound symbol, go ahead and place your cursor. Hang on. Control Z. There we go. Go ahead and place your cursor right after the quotation mark at the end. Hit the delete key a couple times so you delete out all the quotation marks, and then retype in the quotation mark, and your browse button or browse code hint pops up. Hit the enter return key. This time we are going to, instead of to the image, we're going to that page. So in this case, it's the showcase page. Go ahead and click open. If you want, you could even just type these in directly or even copy and paste them from your navigation menu up above, but this is the long way. So delete out the quotation mark, type the quotation mark back in, hit the enter key. Am I sounding like a broken record yet? And this one is internship experience. There we go. And then, oh, I jumped ahead, didn't I? Oh, well, okay, here we go. Now to the second section, we need to link that image down here where we had image SRC. So delete out the quotation marks and then type that back in. Now I'm sounding like a broken record. So here we go. This one is going to be the internship experience. I need to find what that one is called. College Bound is the one on the right. Is it roadmap? Yes, roadmap. Click open. Okay, and in the alt tag, we're going to go internship. Okay, and then let's see, I already linked that up and just like, okay, next, the third section, find the Ahref tag. Delete that out to the quotation mark, retype the quotation mark in, enter return, back, and select the education plan page. And in the image SRC, do the same thing, back off those quotation marks, retype them in, and then look for the image that you have for this. For me, this is College Bound. There we go. And then in the quotation in the center of the alt tag, this is college. I'm just going to say College Bound. Why not? Okay. So from here, we need to style this. And this is going to look really awful if I go ahead and preview this. So let's go ahead and do that, because that's always a good practice to do that. Come over to here. Let's hit refresh. Scroll down. And there we go. So here's the problem. Like, some of it actually is styled, believe it or not. But we have this problem of our text is underlined and it's blue, and that's because we've wrapped everything in that A tag. It displays correctly, at least because we've already used some tags that have been styled already. So what we need to do is create a class that and that's why we have, if we come back to our design here and go back to our code. In our A tag, we inserted a class called container button. We haven't created this yet, so we're going to do that here in just a minute. And let's go ahead and take a look at what this might look like on a laptop. And it should just be really large and all that. So we need to address that. So for mobile wise, we're almost there. But for the desktop version, we have some work to do. Okay, so let's get back into it. Let's drop into our style sheet over here. And believe it or not, we're going to go back up to that section of where we have our grid layout styles. So we're going to add a couple new ones to help out with our layout in the both the mobile view and in mostly in the desktop view. So where we have row, I'm going to go ahead and click my cursor right after that closing curly brace after row, and I'm going to hit the enter return key, and I'm going to type in a new class. Then that one is the grid 3. So remember that's how we set out to create each one of those columns. Now we're in mobile view, right? We're working on the mobile side of things. So really this one's not going to get a whole lot here. We don't actually have to do a lot, but it's important that we do some of this so that way it'll set us up for the desktop query. So grid 3, open up a curly brace, and we're going to say we want this to display as a grid. And for the most part, this is the grid template columns here is just going to get auto. And what that means is, really, like right now it's displaying correctly. And in fact, we probably don't actually have to do this because it is working correctly. But we're going to just be on the safe side. We're going to say we want our column to be auto, which means that it's just going to make it one large thing, and that's all it's going to be. Okay. And next, hit the enter return key after that closing curly brace. And we're going to go ahead and create this column span 1 class that creates each one of those cells for that design or for that section. And we're going to open up a curly brace here, hit the enter return key. And again, since this is just for the mobile view, really this is a tube version. And we're just kind of covering our bases here. We're going to say we want this to span 1, meaning that if this grid here, it's giving it a grid template column of auto, which just basically means it's just one large column that will fill that entire space. And each one of those sections, each one of those columns is going to span 1, meaning that it's going to span that entire space. So I know it kind of feels like it's redundant, but it'll set us up for the desktop version and make sure that we don't have any bugs as well. So after our call span 1 here, I'm going to go ahead and style that container BTN. And so I'll go ahead and hit the enter return key. I know this is kind of a weird spot for this class. And in fact, I may move it down the road. This might be something that I would move, but for now, for this tutorial, we're just going to go ahead and stick it in right after the call span 1. So I'm going to call it period, and really it doesn't matter that it goes here. It's not going to change how the design affects it or anything like that, unlike some programs or some programming languages. But for me, organizationally, I might put this somewhere else. Anyway, so .container btn, that's the class that we're going to apply to the A tag. Open up a curly brace, and we want it to eliminate the underline text. And so an A tag by default, all links by default, well, unless you style them differently, which is what we're doing now, but by default have an underline. The other thing it also has is that it colors it blue. So we're actually going to do something a little different here. We're going to tell our BTN color that we want it to inherit the color. We want it to inherit the color from the parent element. And that should turn it black. Cross fingers here, but I'm pretty sure that it should work. It should turn it black, or whatever color the text is set for that parent element. So let's give it a shot. We're going to save that real quick. And what we're going to see, I'm going to tab over, and hopefully what we should see, nothing out of the norm from when we first previewed it. The one thing that we should see that's different is that our text is black and not blue and not underlined. So nothing else changed. So that's good. We didn't break anything, and still looks like it should. Now what we have though is our desktop version. So I'm going to click over to our desktop version, and we have just that full view. So we need to take care of that. These need to be in columns. So we're going to tab over and locate our desktop section of our grid layout area, and locate where our row class is, and place our cursor after that closing curly brace after row, and hit the enter return key. And here we're going to start with our grid 3 and open up a curly brace and hit the enter return key again. We're going to say we want our margin set to 0 on the top and bottom, and our margin left and right. This is fail-safe just in case for some reason we need it. We want it to, kind of center within that section. You probably won't even notice it that it's there, but we're going to put it in there anyway. And then next, okay. So I'm going to start writing this out, and I'm going to explain what we're doing here. So grid template column, grid template columns. Okay, so in desktop view, remember this is where we're at. Here's where we want to say we want to put each one of these things into columns. We want to make 3 of them. And we're going to do so by using percentages. And it's going to take a little bit of math. So if with 3 columns, right, we would want to make these 33.33% wide. And so with 3 columns, this is how we would display it like this. This is one of the ways we can make this look like how we want it, or lay it out in terms of our code. So each one of these is a column. So as I'm highlighting that, each one of those is a column, and it would distribute evenly within the width. Remember, the width is 100%. So basically we've got 99.9%, and we'd have to probably make up that last little percent there with a 0.4 or 0.4 in the middle or something like that to make it span evenly. But I want to actually have some spacing in between each one of those columns. And I still have to make this add up right in terms of the 100%. So here's what we're going to do. Instead of 33.3%, we're going to make each one of these columns 32%. Like so. Okay? And then we're going to add a gap between each column. Now, math-wise, here's the deal. And I probably should do grid column gap, but we're just going to do grid gap. And it's going to be 2%. Now here's where we got some explaining to do, right? The gap is the space in between each column. So we have 3 columns, meaning that there are 2 gaps, right? So if you kind of see where my cursors are, think about it this way, that's how it works, right? Those are the gaps between each of those columns. Okay? 32 times 3 adds up to be 96%. But we have 2 gaps here. So if we take 100% minus 96%, that leaves us with 4%, which allows us to add a 2% gap between each of those columns, adding up to 100%. Okay? So let's check this out. I'm going to go ahead and save this and then tab over. There's one more thing that I want to do before we're done, but I want to make sure that this works. So click over to here, hit refresh on our screen, scroll down, and boom, there it is. Looks pretty sweet. And, this is actually part of the reason why I like to keep my text justified. Why I left it justified up in here in the desktop version of this area for our p tag, because I like to see that text come all the way out to the edge like that. But that's okay. We'll work on that later. But we need to do one more thing. Notice that when my mouse hovers over each one of these areas, nothing really happens, and you can't tell that these are links unless you know you're internet savvy and you know that little hand symbol changes. So we want to add a little bit of interactivity to our hover property of our design. So I'm going to tab back over to Dreamweaver, and in that same area where we have our desktop area and we have our styles for this section, I'm going to go ahead and put it after our image container. So where you see my little cursor where it says image container. This is actually a really weird spot for this, I know, and this is why I was saying earlier that I think I would rather move it somewhere else. Hit the enter return key, but we won't worry about that now. Don't harp on the big thing, or harp on the little things, right? Okay, so dot container btn. Okay, so that was the class that we created for the A tag, right? But this time what we're going to do is we're going to add a pseudo class called hover. So :hover. So basically what this is saying is when the user hovers over this class, it's going to do something. So what we're going to do is open up a curly brace first. What we're going to do is we're going to add a background. But here's a tricky thing. We want to add a special kind of background. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a linear gradient to this background. And this is actually a pretty cool feature. So we're going to type in background first. And it's very specific on how we do this. First, we type in linear gradient. And so you see we actually have radial and repeating gradients here. So select linear gradient. Okay, so you have a kind of an orange linear gradient. It appears in orange, and then we have our parentheses. We are going to add an RGBA gradient. So this is going to add a little bit of a layer of complexity to this attribute, to this style. So type in RGBA, okay, and then we have to type in another parentheses. Type in another parentheses, and what we're going to do is we're essentially going to put in the same gray for the top, for the one stop of gradient, and then the gray on the other stop of the gradient, but we're going to adjust the opacity so it appears like it's fading in and fading out. So the gray we're going to use is 150, 150, 150, 0.10 for 10%. Okay. Move your cursor using the arrow key to outside of that gradient, and then type in a comma, and then space, and then RGBA again, and then parentheses. And then same thing, 150, 150, 150, and 0. This time we're going to make it 30%. So 0.30. Okay? And then make sure you move your cursor all the way. You should have two parentheses at the very end and then a semicolon. So I'm just going to pause there for about 5 seconds so you can take a look at that setting. And then let's check it out. Okay, so now when I scroll down and I hover over it, I see a little bit of interactivity. And so you can see very top, the gradient is about 10%. It's very light on the top. And then you can see towards the bottom, it gets just a little bit darker. That's pretty cool, huh? So we will actually use this function in like two other parts of our portfolio, maybe one other part. So it's something that we'll use again. Now that we've already built it, it'll be simple to put it in. We'll just have to put in the content. All right, so that's going to round out our design for our homepage on our portfolio. Next up, it'll be the resume.